Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content.
The math lecturer gets to the conclusion of his proof. And the sum of the squares of the other two sides is equal to the square of the hypotenuse, or a square.
Fire! Fire!
This isn't some bored student pulling a fake fire alarm to get out of math class. These are devoted disciples who now smell smoke and hear creaking and crumbling.
We gotta get out of here.
They get up and rush for the exit. Flames are closing in.
Come on, Professor Pythagoras!
Oh no, the ceiling's starting to collapse.
Go! Go! I got it.
One of the audience members, a big beefy guy, places himself directly underneath a beam that's about to crash. Every muscle, every vein in his body is straining.
Come on, go!
Usually, Milo of Croton lifts weights to train for the ancient Greek athletic games. But now, this multiple Olympian victor holds up the roof of a burning building so people can escape with their lives.
Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. Pat, Happy New Year. Welcome back. We took a little break, but we're back now, and it's good to be back at doing this.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, so we have a really fun episode this week that I'm really excited to do. We are going to talk about almost certainly the greatest athlete of the ancient world, and possibly, one of these things about like maybe the greatest athlete ever, if you put it in context of their accomplishments. But because it was before the TV times, like people don't really think about any athlete that was successful before we have footage of them doing things, My father saw Wilt Chamberlain play once, and he said that was like the greatest athlete he had ever seen in his entire life was Wilt Chamberlain. And like Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a basketball game once, and there's no footage of that game. It's like the black and white era,
Yeah.
There was no 3-point line. And so and he scored 100 points in a game. And my dad, he wasn't at that game, but he said he watched him play when Wilt was in Philadelphia. And he was like, this athlete was better than anybody I'd ever seen play at any sport ever. He was so far above and beyond everybody else that it was like so unreal. The, the way they talked about, there was a Major League Baseball player who was talking about Mickey Mantle. And in Major League Baseball, they have the majors and the minors, and there's a couple leagues below that, A-ball, AA, AAA, and then the majors. And, if you perform well in AAA, you get moved up to the majors. If you don't do so well in the majors, you get moved down to AAA. And somebody was talking about Mickey Mantle, and they were like, it was like he got sent down from another league that was above Major League Baseball. But, it's another one we don't have a ton of footage of Mantle playing.
Yeah.
And so you don't really get the feel of it. And the character we're going to talk about today, Milo of Croton, he is that level of athlete. Everybody that we know from the ancient world, all the great writers of the ancient world, that especially the ones that got to see him perform and do his thing, were like, this guy, you just can't imagine how much better he was than everybody else around him at all times.
So even though we don't have footage, even though we don't have records of the level that we expect today, we can't do instant replay.
There's no StatCast. Yeah, we can expect that he was moving exactly this miles per hour,
Yeah, but we're going to do our best, and we have good stories.
Yes, there's good stories about this because Milo of Croton is the greatest athlete of the ancient world. People consistently compare him to Hercules across all media from this time period. And he also ends up joining a geometry cult, which we'll get into. later.
You could call it that. Yeah.
He becomes a math nerd and gets into a math cult, and might fight an army on their behalf.
Possibly.
Yes.
We'll get into it.
We'll get into it. And so we're going to talk about ancient Greek feats of strength, and we're going to talk about ancient Greek feats of mathematical genius. I'm excited for it. Okay, cool. So we are going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we are going to tell the story of the greatest athlete and possibly the greatest nerd in ancient Greece. And I think it'll be pretty fun. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Pat, we are going to talk about Milo of Croton. And so we first need to set the stage on where is Croton, who is Milo, what is the time period we're talking about, where in the world are we?
So we are in Croton in the ancient world, or Crotone as it's known in Italian today. It's a town in southern Italy. This part of Italy was known as Magna Graecia among the Romans because, Magna Graecia means big Greece, and it was called that because there were so many Greek immigrants who had made settlements there. It's like the way you might have, I don't know, Little Italy or Chinatown or whatever in an American city today.
But it's big Greece.
And this was big Greece. Yes, yes. So the southern half of the Italian peninsula had a lot of Greek culture. They sent people to the Olympics, and our boy Milo, our guy Milo, he is an Olympic hero. He's legendary. He won in the Olympiad in 540 BCE in boys wrestling. He was not yet competing as an adult. And then he went on to win 5 more Olympics, and he even competed beyond that well into his 40s. Keep in mind that the Olympics, like today, only happened once every 4 years. So use this to picture his career.
Right. And it happened in actual Greece, right? Like at Olympus, the Olympics were at Olympics. Yeah. So
Olympia. Yeah.
Olympia. Okay. So he had to travel across a sea to get to the Olympics every 4 years. He had to take a voyage on a boat to go compete in the Olympics. And it was every 4 years. So like you said, he wins 6 Olympics, which, means he's competing into his 40s, which is weird for today to be seeing somebody competing in 6 Olympic Games, and to be competing at that level, like winning golds in their 40s, especially at a sport like wrestling, which is like very physical and extreme. Yeah. And this is not wrestling like high school wrestling today. This is like Greco-Roman wrestling, right? We call it the sport in the Olympics today is called Greco-Roman wrestling. It's what they were doing at the time. But also weren't lifespans a lot shorter in ancient Greece? Forget about competing into your 40s.
It depends on how you count it. It depends on how you count. On average, I think you had a lot more infant and childhood mortality. Mm-hmm. So statistically, that would make it, that would
lowers the average.
The mean, that would lower the average. We do hear of people living into their 90s, but do we hear of that because it's worthy of note, because it's unusual? But anyway.
But they didn't have penicillin or ibuprofen or any of these kinds of things. And this guy's competing in the Olympics in his 40s when a lot of people have been dead for a long time by various plagues.
Well, exactly, yeah. And also, honestly, if he's hopping on a boat to travel from Italy to Greece, the Mediterranean is not a safe sea to be sailing on. So, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of
pirates
risk going on.
You're on a rowboat. You're literally on a rowboat because that's what the triremes were, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very big, very elegant and finely crafted rowboats. But yes.
Still powered by an oar.
So here's this guy, and he's winning, Olympic after Olympic. And the Olympics weren't the only athletic games going on. You also had the Pythian Games, which he won 7 times, the Isthmian Games, which he won 10 times, the Nemean Games, which he won 9 times, and he's going up against the greatest athletes of the day. And you mentioned wrestling. He won, he won enough that he was called a periodonticase, which means he's a victor in all 4 of these crown games. So not just the Olympic Games, but the Pythian, the Isthmian, and the Nemean, he won wrestling in all 4 of those, bam, 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 all in one cycle.
Like a grand slam for tennis. Like you win all 4 of the major, because like you said, the Olympics is every 4 years, and some of these other games were also either every 2 or every 4 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's like he won the Olympics, and then he won the World Championships on the 3 years between the Olympics, right?
Exactly.
And so there is a word for that. What was it called?
Periodonticase.
Periodonticase. So that was a title that was given to a person who won their sport in all 4 of these games in the same cycle, which was extremely rare. Right? It's the Triple Crown in horse racing. It's the Grand Slam in tennis. But I think it was probably more rare here than it is even today.
Yeah, and this was Greco-Roman wrestling. I guess you could compare it to mixed martial arts. It was kind of no holds barred. You were not allowed to gouge.
No gouging.
So you couldn't. No gouging. That was a rule. Yeah.
No below the belt hits. No eye gouging. Basically everything else. You throw the guy 3 times, you win. You throw him out. Throw him out of the ring, you win. You pin him. He gives up. He submits with the submission hold. But it's a pretty wild sport. Ancient Greek wrestling is kind of a free for all.
Yeah. And Milo was said to be just utterly huge, an absolute unit. And this is relevant because it's kind of cool, and also you didn't have weight classes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So there's no like featherweight, middleweight, heavyweight. You enter in the wrestling division, and you don't have to cut weight. You don't have to drink a bunch of dehydrate yourself before the weigh-in.
Yes.
You just show up and, this guy is actually 5 times my size, and now I have to wrestle him, and I'm just going to get squished.
Yep. It's quite possible there was squishing. It's said nobody ever kicked out of his pin.
Yeah, I heard that. Nobody ever in his entire career kicked out of him pinning them.
Yeah. And if he is, as people describe, I can totally believe this.
Yes.
So he's this total celebrity athlete, great hero of Greek games. He's the super athlete. He was strong. And we do know a little bit about his training regimen, because you can imagine people would be curious.
Yes.
So
the descriptions of this guy are that he was and you have to take all this with a grain of salt, but the descriptions of him are that if everything that was written about him is to be believed, he was over 7 feet tall and 375 pounds or something like that of pure muscle, right? He looked like Hercules, like the mythological Hercules.
So the story about him is that he picks up a calf, like a baby cow. Mm-hmm. It might be a boy calf, because I think I know where this story's going. Mm-hmm. He picks up the calf on his shoulders, carries it around. Okay. That's, I don't know, how much does a calf weigh? More than I feel like picking up.
Yeah, it's probably heavy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah, more than my average grocery bag, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Probably more than a box of cat litter, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we all know how much cat litter weighs. And this also has to be if the calf is going to cooperate. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, if he picks up the calf from day 1, and then day 2, picks up the calf on his shoulders, walks around, day 3, this keeps going and going and going. And Milo every day picks up the calf, and every day the calf is dutifully eating grass or whatever calves eat, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And over 4 years or whatever, it grows into a bull. And Milo is picking up this bull, and the bull is just like, this is my morning routine. Okay, this human comes along and picks me up, and I'm like, okay, sure, yeah.
Carries me to the watering hole, puts me back down. I drink some water, picks me back up, carries me back to the house.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's his Uber.
And he did this every day. This is a very disciplined athlete we've got here. He's been referred to as the father of progressive resistance training. You know, okay, right after the day right after the Olympics, he picks up a calf. So what happens to the bull that's 4 years old now? Well, what would you do with the bull if you needed a good source of protein?
I see where you're going with this.
Okay. Well, obviously you sacrifice it to the gods.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we did the King Minos episode. If you don't sacrifice the bull to Poseidon, that's how you get a minotaur.
Exactly. So you sacrifice the bull to the gods. And here's the thing. The gods are interested in the aroma of the sacrificed bull. And we know this because Homer tells us in the Iliad and the Odyssey. And then what are you left with? The barbecued bull.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, they just like the smell. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how this works out. Right? The priests really must have put a lot of thought into this. You know?
Yeah. They just like the smell. That's the only, because the smell wafts up to Mount Olympus, and they can smell it, and they'll be like, oh,
exactly. Yeah.
It smells like a party.
Yeah. So us mere mortals have to obviously waste not, want not. We have to eat the rest of the sacrificed animal. So, hey, Milo's strength training. Okay, at some point he's going to, invite his pals for a barbecue. Allegedly, he ate 20 pounds of meat a day. I don't even know how to comprehend that.
That seems like a lot. I mean, you do need protein, and they did not have protein.
You do need protein.
They did not have protein shakes in 540 BC.
No. And he drank a comparable amount of wine.
Yes, this thing I saw on him with wine was that it was 10 liters of wine a day, which would be 13.
How did they figure that?
I don't know. Yeah. Probably the same way they came up with 20 pounds of meat. 10 liters of wine is 13 bottles of wine a day. The Greeks used to water the wine down a little bit, but even if you watered it down by 50%, that's still a lot of wine every day.
And we talked about sacrificing the bull, but he would also sometimes eat meat raw.
Like Rocky. Rocky ate the eggs raw, right?
Yes. And drink the blood to intimidate his opponents.
Yes. So this is the story that I had heard about him with the Olympics, is that like he would compete in the Olympics, he'd win a gold medal for basically fist fighting. Then the next day after the Olympics, he would find a bull, like he lived near a farm or something, and he would find a recently born bull, right, as some calf, and he would pick it up on his shoulders and carry it around. And he would carry it every single day for those 4 years, and every day it would get heavier, and every day he would get stronger. And then at the end of that 4 years, he would carry the bull from like Magna Graecia to Olympia, maybe on a boat or whatever, but like he would walk into the Olympic Stadium, when they do the parade of nations or whatever at the beginning of the Olympics, he would carry the fully grown bull on his shoulders, carry it to like where they light the torch, throw it down, sacrifice it to the gods, and then just like drink its blood in front of everybody to just be like, fight me now. And that was Milo of Croton. He did this for 24 years. Yeah. And and that's how you get a reputation for eating 20 pounds of meat a day.
Yeah. And a live bull isn't the only astoundingly heavy thing that he carried. Sometimes if someone is totally badass, you make a sculpture of them. And sometimes it's a sculpture not made out of like styrofoam or balloons, but bronze. And they made a life-size sculpture of him. And
probably some famous artist, right?
Yeah. And the story is that he personally carried it from Crotone in Magna Graecia in southern Italy to Olympia in Greece. This is not just next door. It's like, then, as you pointed out, he has to, like, maybe he's taking it on a boat, but even if you allow for a little bit of, transit on a boat, he's still carrying a life-size bronze sculpture.
Of himself.
And also of himself. And he was not petite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a life-size sculpture, this is not, I don't know, like a 20-pound toddler. This is I don't know.
Like you said, descriptions the only description we have to go on his height and weight puts him at 7 feet tall and 375 pounds or something like that. Maybe 9 feet tall.
That's a lot of bronze.
There's a lot of bronze, yeah. Even if it's hollow, it's still heavy.
Yeah.
But he would do like these feats of strength though, right? That was his thing.
Yes, he would. Yeah.
I love
these. Like cool party tricks or something.
Mm-hmm.
So badasses, I don't know, try this at home. He would hold his arm out with his fingers outstretched, like, not a fist, but like his hand just flat, like fingers forming a flat surface. And he would challenge people to try to bend his little finger, his pinky finger. And they would try. And they would fail. He would just be able to keep his pinky finger just stretched out like that. Bam.
They couldn't bend his pinky finger. They couldn't bend his, like, even like big, strong guys like would sign up. They couldn't bend his pinky finger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He would also stand on a greased iron discus and challenge people to push him off it. And I guess my question is this a feat of strength or a feat of balance or just a feat of, I don't know, inertia and the laws of physics? I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Like maybe he was just that good. He was that strong and agile. He was just good at all of those things.
Yeah.
The greased iron disc is the most interesting one because that feels like something you need like a little bit more setup. Like the holding out your hand, and that's a thing you could do at a party. Like, yeah, see if you can bend my finger. I bet you can't, right? I'll hold it out here. I'll flex it, and I bet you can't bend it. Forget about arm wrestling. Like you can't bend my finger. The greased iron disc, that requires like some setup. I think about Julie Daubigny doing like the fencing demonstrations. This seems like something you would like have to set up in a town square or something, right?
Yeah.
Like like a mechanical bull. You could have to set this thing up and be like, check this out.
Mm-hmm.
I can stand on this greased disc and you can't push me off it.
Yep. But once you set it up, you've got entertainment for the townspeople. So
yeah, I mean, there was no TV in these days, right? What else are you going to do?
No. Yeah. And then, okay, this one you have to visualize. He would tie, let's call it a bandana, around his head. Why might he do that, do you think?
I want you to tell the story. This is so funny. I love this. I love this story.
Okay, most of us, if we're tying a bandana or
it's because you're about to do something badass, right? Like Rambo's getting ready to fight some guys. You tie the thing around your head, right? Like, or the Ninja Turtles put on their bandanas. They're ready to fight, right?
Yeah. Okay, maybe it's to mark what team you're on. Maybe it's to keep the sweat from falling into your face.
LeBron wears a headband.
It's just, yeah, okay. I mean, if LeBron does it, it must be badass, And who knows? Maybe all of these things are true, but what he actually did with this is he would hold his breath and pop his forehead veins and break the cord that way.
He would flex his forehead vein so hard that it would break the cable or pop the bandana and break the thing off his head, like an anime character. Right, this is Dragon Ball.
Yes.
This is something wild.
Okay, yeah, but in Dragon Ball, we assume that this is like artistic exaggeration because it's anime.
Yeah. The story is that he could do this in real life. He would tie a cord around his head and hold his breath, and his veins in his forehead would pop, would break the cable, break the rope.
Yep. Break the headband. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah, this is a thing that I can do. I don't know how I learned that I'm capable of this, but I bet I'm going to try it, and it looks like I can do it. I'll bet you 5 dinaries I can do this.
So even his forehead was swole.
Yes.
Okay.
Muscles on muscles.
Okay. And then also, okay, if you go to the grocery store, sometimes of the year you can get a whole fresh pomegranate. Have you ever tried like eating a pomegranate, like a fresh pomegranate, like breaking it open and getting the seeds out yourself rather than having someone else serve them to you on your salad or something?
Yes, I have done that. So that's I'm in Brazil now, and that's a thing that's like a little bit more common here than it is in the US. But like you can get like pieces of pomegranate and you pop the seeds out and you eat them.
Yeah. It can get kind of messy, you know? So Milo, he would hold a pomegranate, like a whole pomegranate in one hand.
And they're big. Pomegranates are big.
Yeah. Like this is,
it's a large hand to hold a pomegranate, entire pomegranate in your hand.
And he would challenge other people to just take the pomegranate from him. No one ever could. And here's the thing, even though he held the fruit very tightly, it was never damaged. Okay.
He couldn't take it out of his hand, and he wouldn't damage it by holding it because he wasn't trying that hard.
Apparently, yes. Yeah. And honestly, with the pomegranate, if you damage it, you'll know because there's going to be bright red juice all over the place.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's Milo. He's a multi-Olympic gold medal athlete. He performs these feats of strength to like shock and amaze people. Everybody loves him. Everybody, wants him to advertise for them. He's the greatest sports hero, the greatest athlete, the most badass warrior, the toughest man in all of Greater Greece. And and then he joins a math cult,
which we would not necessarily have predicted.
No, it's a lot of people didn't see him joining a geometry cult, and but then he does do that, and it actually works out pretty well because the math cult goes to war, and when they go to war, they're very glad they had Milo of Croton to lead their armies.
I think we might be having a lot of questions about a lot of things you just said there, Ben.
Yes, that's to be expected. We're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the math cult war and how Milo of Croton fits into this. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We are talking about great athletes of the ancient world. And now it's time in this story to introduce Pythagoras of Samos, as in the Pythagorean theorem, like the triangle guy.
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Yes, that Pythagorean theorem. And how does that factor into this dude we were just talking about who can pop cables with his forehead veins when he screams really loud? Let's find out. But first we need to talk about Pythagoras, and we need to set the stage on this guy. So Pythagoras, everybody knows and loves, and I use that sarcastically, the Pythagorean theorem that you have to learn in whatever 7th grade when you're doing Geometry 101. Pythagoras is actually a super weird and interesting character that is worth talking about. Pat, you did the jock. I'm going to talk about the nerd here. Pythagoras, we don't have a lot of like concrete details of his life, but we believe he was born around 570 BC on the Greek island of Samos. He is easily 20 to 30 years older than Milo of Croton, and that is more or less accepted. He was on this island of Samos. He's really excited about math and geometry and learning things of like, math and engineering. He leaves the island of Samos because there is a tyrant on the island that is, dictating too much stuff. And for whatever reason, Pythagoras and this tyrant, his name is Polycrates, they have beef. And Pythagoras leaves. He starts traveling around the world.
Beef. I see what you did there.
Yeah. Not literal beef, because Pythagoras does not eat beef, although Milo of Croton, being a follower of the Pythagorean cult, does eat beef, but we're going to get into that in a second.
We'll get into that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
we'll get into the dietary restrictions later.
There are dietary restrictions to this cult, but they don't apply to everybody. Okay.
Exactly.
So Pythagoras is from Samos. At some point, he ends up leaving. He travels around. He goes to Babylonia. He goes to Egypt. He travels the Middle East. He travels North Africa. He travels Magna Graecia. He is learning everything he can learn about math, and he's super excited about it. And when he learns all of this information and he's like super excited about all of the great things that he's been learning, he returns to Samos to share it with the people that he grew up with.
Yes, spread the word of math. He, quote, wished to give his fellow citizens a taste of the sweetness of the mathematical disciplines, though they were unwilling to be instructed in them.
That sounds a lot like seventh grade. Yeah. It sounds a lot like learning the Pythagorean theorem for the first time. Your teacher wishes to give the fellow citizens a taste of the sweetness of mathematical disciplines, although the students are unwilling to be instructed in them. Okay. So the Samians are not interested in what he has to say, no matter how excited he is, although he does get one person who is pretty on board with this. And this is one of these things that we keep running into, the Mithridates situation, because the person that is super excited about it is also named Pythagoras, which is going to be possibly
Maybe it was
confusing.
just a popular name on Samos?
Maybe he named himself after his favorite mathematician. Maybe he changed his name to Pythagoras to honor his math. I don't know. Okay. So,
who knows? So this other Pythagoras kid actually seems to want to learn math. And so our Pythagoras says, okay, yeah.
And so at first, the Pythagoras, he pays the kid to learn math, which usually it's the other way around. Usually you get paid to instruct somebody else in math, but he's just like, nobody's interested in what I have to say. I'll just pay you, take my class. I'll just train you to be my successor or something. Eventually the kid starts paying to keep the lessons going. So through a series of events, the two Pythagoras's end up in southern Italy, in Magna Graecia, in Croton. And our Pythagoras, he manages to get himself appointed to the city council of Croton because he has deep thoughts that are not only about mathematics. All we know, the thing that we know about Pythagoras now is that he is he came up with the Pythagorean theorem, which, people might have known about that before him, and there's some debate as to whether he actually invented that, although his name has been attached to it for hundreds of years, so we're just going to go with it for right now. But he had a whole lot of other thoughts, didn't he, Pat? A whole lot of other things that he was excited about. That were not just the area of a triangle. Or the hypotenuse of a triangle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And for him, like, geometry also had mystical properties anyway. So he was interested in philosophy, the music of the spheres. He thought that mathematics was sort of the foundation of the entire universe, and it was incredibly beautiful and important. And you talk to a mathematician. Yes, math is very important. And he sets up a philosophical school. Yeah,
he sets up a philosophical school in Croton that gets a little bit more traction than his teachings in Samos. And people start to be drawn to this. And this is where it gets a little weird, because Pythagoras creates the Pythagorean cult, which is a cult, which is a weird commune of, we think, maybe like 600 people in Croton, which was a significant portion of the population of the city, that lived together in a commune.
One of the doctrines that we hear about from sources is that they believed in sharing things in common, which I guess means that they live in a commune.
Yeah, we don't know, because a lot of it was a secret society, and a lot of what they kept is secret. Like, followers were sworn unto death not to reveal any of the secrets. And there are like famous books from this time period that didn't survive to now despite like the efforts of humanity to keep those stories alive, they failed. And this guy was like, I don't want anybody to know anything that I'm doing ever. And we don't now to this day know what he was doing ever. So there's some interesting things.
Well, we don't know what he was telling the inner circle. He did speak publicly. He was on city council, so he had, political opinions that he expressed. And, So some of it got out, but some of what we hear might be garbled.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And some people didn't like him. Some people liked him and were trying to carry on his story. And some people didn't like him and were saying bad things about him after his time.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that he was super into math. We know he was into the music of the spheres, which is like kind of finding harmony between math and music and the greater existence of the universe. He, like you said, he thought mathematics was the foundation of the universe. He was into the transmigration of souls, which is the idea that like when a creature dies, its soul passes to a newly born thing, like a reincarnation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody in the cult shared property. There were, like you said, dietary restrictions, one of which was that he was a vegetarian, although Pythagorean vegetarianism is a little different than the modern doctrine, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you consider modern vegetarianism as don't eat meat, like don't eat the flesh of a creature, then yeah, we've got some differences here. He may have allowed the eating of sacrificial animals. So these days you have people who are, like, say, lacto-ovo-pescatarian, which means that they're mostly vegetarian, but they also eat eggs and fish. Some people are vegetarian, but they sometimes eat chicken, So with Pythagoras, it seems like he may have allowed people to eat sacrificial animals. And sacrificial animals tend to be bulls, like cows, maybe pigs. Not as much chicken or fish. You tend not to sacrifice chicken or fish to the gods. You might sacrifice a goat. So
that's so interesting, right? Because like you said, there's very few like subdivisions of vegetarian that are just like, well, I just eat vegetables and red meat, right? I feel like that's one of the less common ones. Oh, eggs is okay, fish is okay. There's various variations on that, but they're like, like red meat. Sacrifice the cow yourself. If you cut its throat, it's okay to sacrifice as long as they burn it correctly for the gods to smell it on Mount Olympus. It's fine. So
apparently,
yes, and so but it was a religious thing, right? He was like pretty religious, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
That's the read I get on it. But weirdly, all vegetables were okay except for fava beans.
Yes.
No fava beans.
Which is counterintuitive if you think about vegetarian today. Like a lot of vegetarian recipes rely on beans.
You got to get your protein from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But no fava beans. Specifically fava beans. He did not like them. And there's like some debate as to why that specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if maybe he just didn't like them. Like, I don't like eggplant. I guess if there was if I started a cult, I'd be like, don't put any eggplant or like shredded coconut in anything for my cult because I hate it.
Okay. So if we join the cult of Ben, you have to give up eggplant.
Gotta give up eggplant,
you hear that, everyone? Okay, just so you can make an informed decision.
Yeah, those are my two things. I don't eat either of those things. I don't like them.
Yeah.
I'm not morally opposed to them. And it's possible they can be done in a way that I will like. I will try them, but I've never once liked either of those things. So take that for what you will. Yep. I got a lot of heat from people when I said I didn't like Kubrick movies that much. I got a lot of emails about that.
Oh no!
I don't know if the shredded coconut and eggplant Twitter is going to get mad at me about this also, but
are we going to have eggplant discourse?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I'm ready. It's not a hill I'm willing to die on.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you start your own cult, you are allowed to make your own rules.
That's true.
So,
that's
people choose to join the cult, and it's not a cult. They are free to leave at any time.
That's true. Yeah. And that is one of the upsides to being a cult leader, I suppose. So what were the theories on the fava beans?
So
because they're interesting. I feel like there's some interesting reasoning here because nobody really knows the answer to this. And there's been some question as to where this comes from.
So some of these theories are from ancient writers, Aristotle, Diogenes, the usual guys. And they were outsiders.
Just Aristotle talking about Pythagoras not liking fava beans.
Okay. So, yeah. So maybe one speculation is that fava beans either looked too much like, take your pick, human fetuses or human testicles. And so that was a reason not to eat them.
This is what people are going to say with my eggplant thing. They're going to be like, "Oh, the eggplant emoji. That's why you don't like eggplants."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's all foul. It's all Freudian at the end of the day.
Yep. Yes. Part of a fertility cult, which is so that's maybe one reason why Pythagoras was squicked out by fava beans. It also might be that if he was a proponent of the doctrine of the transmigration of souls, or metempsychosis in Greek, if you were eating beans, maybe someone's soul had passed into those beans. And why might beans inspire this belief? Well, the ancient Greeks associated the soul with the breath or wind, and beans produce wind.
Is this a fart joke?
This is a fart joke.
Wow.
I mean, but maybe. This is speculation. Maybe not. I don't know, And it's also possible, and this is more of a modern speculation, if we're talking about fava beans in particular and not just beans in general, it was maybe an awareness at some level of favism, which is basically a life-threatening allergy to fava beans. If you have certain genes, if you eat too many fava beans, bad things start happening to your body. So maybe this was a way of just making sure he didn't bump up against that allergy in any of his followers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I ate a bunch. It made me really sick, and now I think they're evil.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Take your pick. You can draw your own conclusions.
Yeah. You can join my cult. You can learn a lot of cool math stuff, a lot of philosophy stuff. We can talk about transmigration of souls. We can share all of our stuff. No fava beans, no fish, no chicken. There was a story about Pythagoras that he had a thigh that was made of gold, which is some like divine reference, made him semi-divine.
Because obviously only demigods have body parts made of gold.
That's true.
I mean, obviously.
For sure, that seems likely. There was a theory that he was able to bilocate, like be in two places at the same time, because somebody spotted him in both Croton and Metapontum at the same time, which I suppose that's possible.
Maybe?
I picture Pythagoras as an aesthetic weirdo with a long white beard. I imagine there was a lot of that running around Greece at this time. So maybe it was his stunt double. Maybe it was just
some other guy.
Pythagoras doppelganger. Maybe it was just some other person.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he could bilocate with his golden thigh. I mean, if I saw two dudes with golden thighs in the same place, in two different places at the same time, I'd probably assume it was the same person. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a story about Pythagoras, Pat, that you came across and his vegetarianism that I feel like we should tell here, because this is we've kind of set the stage for Pythagoras being an aesthetic, not like aesthetically pleasing, like it looks nice, aesthetic as like a person who eschews all of the, pleasures of the world and luxuries of the world in order to like wear sackcloth and like think about important things and, focus on serious stuff all the time. But there's a story about him that kind of highlights how weird this guy was and how intensely he believed in his doctrines.
So this story, in my head, I'm calling this, what does math have to do with vegetarianism? Well, not all that much, but there is a story that this story combines both his interest in math and his interest in vegetarianism. So there's a story that he's walking along the beach. It's this hot sunny summer afternoon. He sees a fishing boat, and the fishermen are just coming in with the day's catch. Their net is full of the bounty of the sea. And Pythagoras goes up to them and says, "Oh, hey, fisher folk, I bet you I could guess the exact number of fish in your net." And the fishermen are like, "Sure, buddy." And maybe as a joke, they tell him that if you can actually guess the exact number of fish in our net, we'll give you a prize. We'll give you whatever you want. They're not expecting to have to, follow through on this. I might be giving away a little too much.
They're not prepared for the power of a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Exactly. So they say, okay, they shake on it or whatever. Okay, cool, we have a deal. Pythagoras announces a number. Now, the exact number is not recorded in our sources. It is just, he says a number. And the fishermen look at one another.
And they're like, how did he know?
I think it's more than 6. Ben, I think it's more than 6, okay? This is a number that a reasonable passerby might have trouble guessing.
Yeah, it's how many jelly beans in the jar.
Yes, exactly. And these fish, some of them might be different sizes, So Pythagoras announces a number. Fishermen look at one another like, yeah, okay, this sounds okay, ballpark, okay. Maybe, this isn't this guy's first rodeo. Maybe he kind of knows how much goes into a daily catch. I don't know. So they say, okay, we'll play this out. So they count. They open up the net on the boat, and it takes a while. The fish are they're flapping around, gasping for breath, but it takes a while. But then they realize, wait a minute, this dude got it right. He got it exactly right, no margin of error. So the fishermen actually have to do what he asks. And they're thinking, oh God, what are we going to have to do? Is he going to just demand to take the entire day's haul? Are they going to, is he going to ask us to dance with our underwear on our heads? Whatever. And Pythagoras says, now, remember, this is fish are lying out. How long can a fish last out of water?
Mm-hmm.
Not that long, okay? Yeah. And Pythagoras says, return the fish, all of them, alive to the sea. And the fishermen are like, dude, do you know how the lifespan of a fish works? How long have we been hanging out here in the hot summer sun, counting these, millions and billions of fish? But here's the catch. Amazingly, all of the fish were still alive. So the fishermen can actually uphold their end of the bargain. They return the fish to the sea. So they have to give up their day's catch. Okay, whatever. It was entertaining. And then Pythagoras actually gives them money to cover the cost of the fish.
Because he just doesn't want the fish to die.
Exactly, apparently, yeah.
Saved the whole day's fish, I guess.
So I guess maybe he founded another school of Pythagoras.
Oh, man.
A school of fish.
Yeah,
okay.
No, they didn't use that joke. The first time you told me that story, that joke was not included.
Sorry about
that.
Okay.
Okay. It's plain to type. So, but that's it. That's Pythagoras. He's a aesthetic weirdo who walks by fishermen and asks them this kind of thing and has this story associated with him. And some people are super intrigued by this and they join his cult, and some people they hate him. He drives them crazy because they think that he's just like a rogue lunatic. There are some Greek philosophers. Heraclitus calls him the chief of charlatans, who's like a contemporary Greek philosopher. Just like, this guy is like a complete moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't listen to this guy. But some people, he's a fraud. Yeah, he's a fraud. Don't listen to this guy. He's a maniac. He's a total nutcase. Don't join these weirdos. Mm-hmm. And some people dislike him and some people like him. And one of the people that probably liked him was our friend Milo of Croton, the strongest man alive and the greatest athlete and the most famous sports hero in the Greek world. So Milo joins the cult, but he joins it at an interesting time in which there are some enemies. Pythagoras is making enemies as much as he's making friends, and now there's some trouble showing up, and we are going to find ourselves in a military conflict. But before that, it kind of begins with what we talked about in the cold open, which is a fire in the house of one of while Pythagoras is teaching, Pat.
So Pythagoras and some of his followers were hanging out in a building. Pythagoras may have been lecturing. And all of a sudden, whoops, fire. The temple is on fire. It is starting to collapse. And Milo says, no, the rest of you run. I got this. And he holds up the roof to let all of his fellow Pythagorean followers escape.
Which is just this like great heroic moment for him of like, and there's some theory that like Pythagoras was there when this happened.
Yes,
like he was giving a speech, and for whatever reason, the building caught on fire. And there's some theory that it might have been arson. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this Pythagorean mystery cult. So like we said, he didn't really want people to know the inner workings of what happened, and people didn't really know, and people guessed, and there are a lot of guesses out there. And so a lot of what we've been talking about with Pythagoras and with a lot of this is like, people guessing as to what happened and speculation. But it seems to us, at least, that Milo was probably there, and Pythagoras, we're not sure if he was in the building or not, but this story of Milo holding up the building as it was on fire and collapsing and all of these people running out, that is retold through several sources that are contemporary with him. And so it seems likely that he at least held up a pillar or held a door open or held a roof or something. So a big, strong dude, and he saved a bunch of people's lives here, one of whom may have been Pythagoras, and many of whom might have been Pythagorean cultists. So the arson is an interesting factor to this, though, because Pythagoras had been gaining himself some enemies, and Croton had been gaining himself some enemies because he was on the council, and he had gotten some other Pythagoreans on the council with him. And that caused some trouble with a nearby town. And Milo's going to find himself in the middle of it. So, Pat, we have war with the Sybarites.
Yes. So a nearby town, the town of Sybaris, is it's this flourishing town. They have a lot of people. They have a lot of people who are well off. There's a guy who gains control of the city of Sybaris, and he, for whatever reason, decides he wants to exile a bunch of people and confiscate their property. So the people he exiles, the people on his list, they leave, and they go to Croton, and they're exiles. They're not, they're feeling a little vulnerable. They take refuge at the altars to the gods that are set up in the agora, in the marketplace. Okay, fine. But then the leader of the Sybarites sends ambassadors to Croton saying, send back these exiled people, or we, Sybaris, will attack you, Croton.
But that doesn't make any sense. He exiled these people, and so Sybaris. So these are like city states, right? Like Athens and Greece, right?
Yeah.
Little city states. And so Sybaris, this guy takes over. He's got all these people that make him mad. He exiles them, which they didn't want to leave town, but they have to leave town or they're going to die. They go to Croton. Yeah. They set up a new life there, and then he sends them messages like send them back, which they definitely don't want to do now. They definitely don't want to go back. And Croton really has no
Yes.
reason to give them back. But like, why does he want them back? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, this guy, okay. So the people of Croton are thinking, okay, we have to deal with this. So they have a public assembly. And at first, the majority of people think, okay, this is really not our problem. Let's just send these people back to Sybaris and let the Sybarites deal with it. Whatever. We don't want to get involved.
Not our problem.
But then Pythagoras gets up and he says, no, we should protect these exiles. They have supplicated the gods at the altars in our own marketplace. So, we should respect the gods. We should give these people sanctuary. And Pythagoras is persuasive. Public opinion goes along with this, changes. And the people of Croton say, okay, we're going to keep these exiles.
There's the thing of like, they're probably getting sent back to be executed, right? And so there's the like, do we want that blood on our hands? Like, they came here, they look good for us for help. Like, do we really want to send them back? Like, I understand, the Pythagorean point of view here of like, we really can't send these people back to just get slaughtered. But also now we have to fight a war over this, which sucks too. And Sybaris has way more people than Croton and a bigger army than Croton, and could probably easily stomp Croton, at least on paper.
Yes. However, Sybaris has, 300,000?
Mm-hmm.
The Croton has 100,000, but one of them is Milo.
One of them is Milo of Croton, who is worth...
Yes.
He's a 3x force multiplier in combat because he shows up ready to fight. And when the people of Croton arrive for battle, they show up on the battlefield. The Sybarites show up for battle. At the head of the Croton army is Milo of Croton, the greatest and most famous athlete in the known world, wearing 6 laurel wreaths from each one from an Olympic victory. He's dressed like Hercules. He is carrying a war club, and he's wearing a cape of a lion's like pelt that he had killed and skinned and whatever, which was also very Herculean. So when Croton arrives on the battlefild, their army is commanded by Milo of Croton, it's basically like, we've been making these, it's whatever, Bill Russell or Tom Brady or whatever, but wearing all of their rings from all their championship rings. Yeah. And he's got all the laurels. He's got the lions. But he's dressed literally like a god. He's whatever, 7.5 feet tall and 400 pounds or something. And he is, the Grand Slam champion in warfare fighting. And he shows up at the head of this army. And you got to imagine that if you were like a Sybarite spearman and you see that lined up against you, you're just like, now what? Now I got to fight the Rock, right? Like, this is, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
And there's a big battle. There's a single battle. And Milo terrifies the enemy because they now have to fight. And a lot of these guys, and Milo at this point is like in his late 30s, early 40s. He's been dominant for 20-something years. A lot of the guys that are fighting against him probably grew up watching him on TV and are so scared of him that they don't want to fight him. And he's dressed like a demigod. They get up there and they, Diodorus writes about it, and maybe we should just read his description of this because it's pretty good. Yeah. When the Sybarites, 300,000 of them, collided in battle with the Crotoniates, who were 100,000 in number, the leader of the men of Croton was Milo the athlete. And by the way of overflow of his bodily strength, he was first to turn the tide of battle against the enemy ranks facing him. And that was because this man, who had won 6 victories in the Olympics and who had an inner force that matched his physique, is said to have faced the battle while crowned with 6 garlands that he had won in the Olympics, and while outfitted in the mode of Heracles with a lion skin and a club. Having become the one who was responsible for the victory, he was admired as a wonder by the citizens of Croton. And that's the description.
Yes.
That is the only description we have of this battle, but Croton wins. And Milo is the hero of the
Croton
day.
wins, yes. Yeah. And supposedly there's a story that the city of Croton tore down their walls because they said, we don't need walls to defend us. We've got Milo.
He's a superhero. He's a superhero.
He's totally a superhero.
Like a real life superhero. What a wild character. What a wild
And he's
story.
even got a superhero costume, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And he continues to be a badass athlete after this. He keeps winning games. Like he hadn't won all of his, whatever it was, 26 victories. He wins 26 national championships, I think it was. 32. He wins 32 championships of like being the strongest man in the Greek world. He does this 32 times. And he is eventually defeated in his 7th Olympics. He must be well into his 40s at this point. We don't really know exactly how old he is. He goes up against a guy named Timotheus, who wasn't born when Milo won his first 2 Olympics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so this guy, Timotheus, like he's grown up wanting to be a Greco-Roman wrestler. And so his idol has always been Milo of Croton, who was the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler who ever lived, right? To this day was probably the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler just by record alone. And Timotheus, he's like, I'm not even going to try to, Milo was never pinned. Milo was never thrown. He was nobody kicked out of a pin of his. So Timotheus beats him by just wearing him out, kind of like Ali and Foreman. Just like he fights him, but he just runs away, like, you know, tries to tire him out until Milo eventually gets too tired, and Timotheus can push him out of the ring. And so on his 7th games, Milo loses finally. And that's kind of the end of his Olympic glory, was that he competed in 7 Olympics and he won 6 of them, which is pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
Even today with modern training techniques and supplements and things. To compete in 7 Olympic games is pretty wild.
Yes.
And then Pat, you know, with his career kind of over, he leaves his boots in the ring and he then dies in a weird and interesting way that mirrors the weird and interesting story we've been telling so far.
Yes. He's out walking in the woods and he sees a tree that someone started to split. So they've put a wedge in the tree to help split it. And Milo's thinking, maybe he's thinking, hey, I can help this farmer out. So he's Milo. He starts splitting the wood with his bare hands. However, he gets stuck.
Yeah, the wedge pops out. And in some versions of the story, the farmer is there and Milo's like, hey, I'll take care of this for you. I'll just rip this tree stump apart with my bare hands, which is just apparently a thing that Milo could do. But this kind of ends up being this metaphor for him being on the downswing of his career. And, you know, he's lost and he just quite hasn't realized that he's not the fighter he once was. So, you know, he offers to help this farmer and I'll do this for you. But as he's pulling on the tree stump, the wedge holding it open pops off and the tree stump slams shut on his hand and traps his hand. Now, in some versions of the story, the farmer is like, I'll go get help, and he runs off to get help. And in some versions of the story, there is no farmer, and Milo just came upon this tree stump and decided he was just going to do this entire thing all by himself. But for whatever reason, his hand gets stuck in this tree trunk.
Because he's Milo. Yeah. And if his hand gets stuck, it means Milo's stuck. Oh, yeah. You know, all that strength in his little pinky finger, it's not helping him now.
In various versions of the story, it's a different wild animal. In some versions, a lion shows up and fights, and he fights the lion, and the lion kills him and eats him. And in some versions of the story, it's a pack of wolves. But for whatever reason, he's trying to split this tree trunk. It gets stuck on his hand, and wild animals show up and kill him and eat him. And he fights them off until he dies. But that is how he goes down.
But he's Miloing all the way down, you know.
He goes down fighting wild animals with one hand.
Fighting wolves,
one-handed.
With one hand,
yes.
yeah.
And Pausanias says, such was the fate that befell Milo, which this is the story that we now associate with Milo of Croton, is that he was the greatest Olympic athlete of all time. He's defeated in his 7th Olympics, and shortly thereafter, he gets his hand stuck in a tree and is eaten by wolves or a lion, and it goes down, I don't know, fighting wild animals until they eat him. And, you know, I'm still not sure if this is badass or humiliating, but it is interesting that his death became like a very famous piece of Renaissance sculpture. So there's a sculpture of him getting bit on the ass by a lion on display at the Louvre, which is kind of a cool way to be remembered, you know?
Well, yeah.
So, but that's the end of Milo. He dies fighting lions.
Yeah.
He dies fighting a lion and losing with one hand.
Yes.
But that's Milo of Croton. He was the most badass athlete in the history of ancient Greece. He ended up joining a math cult led by an eccentric weirdo. Got so involved in it that he might have probably been there to save the lives of several cultists while the place was on fire. He then got involved with the cult enough that there was a war between them and a rival city in which he led the army dressed up like Hercules and scared the enemy so badly that they lost the war and the town does not exist anymore. Whereas Croton does. I was there a couple of years ago. Yes. It's nice.
Yeah.
We had an awesome museum of like ancient Greek stuff that was really cool. And then he dies fist fighting a lion, which is pretty badass. Or a pack of wolves, which equally badass.
Is also, yes.
Yes. So that's Milo of Croton. Badasses of antiquity. Progressive resistance training. Just find that cow today. And that's the lesson we're going to take away from this story is you just tomorrow go out, find a baby cow, pick it up, carry it around a little bit.
Do the same the next day.
4 years from now, you're going to be super jacked.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's the story we have. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we really appreciate you being here and listening to the show. And we hope you will stick with us for future episodes. And we will see you next week for another Badass.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.